Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the West Lindsey series. This is one of the 9 districts of Lincolnshire and one of the county's most rural. It has 128 civil parishes. Let's see which one this episode's all about. Welcome back to West Lindsey, everybody. Now, last week we were in Caistor on the Wolds, and we didn't really see the Wolds, and there's a reason for that, and that's because once you get out of Caistor, you're actually on the Wolds. And here, in this place, a very, very tiny place, you are definitely in an area of outstanding natural beauty. Look at that for a start, those hills in the distance. This place is tiny, really, really small. It consists of 2 main parts. You've got the main village, which is where I am now, which is on the A46, by the way, so I'm having to shout a little bit. And then there's a smaller part called Parva, or should I say Cabourne Parva, because this is the parish of Cabourne. The West Lindsey series is sponsored by Gainsborough Cycles, 01427 617 752. For all your cycling needs, this is your one-stop shop, located at 20 Ropery Road or online at gainsboroughcycles.com. There's a link in the description. Gainsborough Cycles, ask for Trevor Halstead. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like, and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Cabourne is a small village situated on the A46 just over 1 mile east of Caistor in West Lindsey. Ignore Wikipedia, it will tell you it's in Swallow Parish. That's wrong, it's a civil parish in its own right, and it's one of the smallest in West Lindsey. With a population of less than 100, it's sort of surprising that it's in 2 parts. Those would be Cabourne Village, which lies on the A46, the main road between Lincoln and Grimsby, and Cabourne Parva, a much smaller hamlet to the north. The name is recorded as Caburne in the Domesday Book. Burn we've met before, that means stream, but as for the K part at the front, well, that's less clear. The stream in question, though, is likely a well or a spring which flows close to the church, a water source which has never ever run dry according to local legend. Whatever the story behind the name, Cabourne is way more than just a small hamlet on a major road. As we travel around this one, mainly by car, you'll see why. It's got a huge monument off limits to the public, a well-known events venue, and a creepy story about, of all things, a sack of grain which was turned into stone. Yep, this one was a fun one to make. Let's learn some more about Cabourne. We start on the A46. To be honest, there wasn't really any other place to start. Right in the centre of downtown Cabourne, our first landmark is the church. You might think this is the only building of note in a place this small, but you'd be wrong. Nonetheless, it's a Grade 2 listed building dedicated to St Nicholas. The tower dates from the 11th century, and the rest of the church is 15th century. It was heavily restored in 1872. During restoration, a Norman font was unearthed below the floor. You'll also find a late 11th century grave marker outside the chancel. To the northeast of the church is that well which has never run dry according to the locals. As well as this church, the primitive Methodists also had a small chapel here. Outside we have a church notice board. It's not a parish notice board, but it's the only one I'm likely to come across in a place this small. Tick it off, people. So there's not much at all to Cabourne Village, apart from the church which you've just seen. There are a few scattered farmhouses and farms, like for example that one over the way. I will go up there in a short while just to show you that really Cabourne is nothing much more than just a collection of houses, really, nothing much more than that. I'm heading this way to start with though, because this is where I know there's a village sign for the thumbnail. As you head for Caistor, you'll pass the vicarage on the right. This is the most expensive property in the village, valued at just over £1 million. After this, civilization just, well, stops. On a small eminence after the vicarage, there's an airstrip. What I was trying to point to here was a windsock, which was just about visible. We haven't seen a lot of the A46 up until now on the channel, really. This is the road that links Grimsby to Lincoln, Newark and Leicester. Part of it follows the Fosse Way further south. I passed this curious looking building next. I don't know what this was in truth, maybe a pumping station of some kind or a house with no windows, who knows. As you leave Cabourne towards Caistor, the road starts to climb steeply up towards Caistor top. Upon reaching the summit, you'll be greeted with more views that look as nice as this. So that's pretty much it in this direction. The A46 runs back towards Caistor at this point, to the cart which you saw across from the Old Fleece Inn last week. And yeah, now it's time to go back the other way, and you'll see in the other direction it's pretty much the same story. There's not really much the other way either. The rest of Cabourne is pretty much just a handful of isolated houses and farm buildings. Mind you, don't be fooled, because once upon a time there were more buildings here. For one, it used to have a parochial school which was built here in 1856. Attendance in 1871 was about 30. Cabourne would be lucky to have that many residents these days. Cabourne's history can go back further than that though. If you peek through these trees you can see a pond. The location of this gives us a bit of a clue. It's believed to have once been the former village green in front of the church, with the aforementioned well earlier at one end of it. If so, it's now been infilled. So despite Cabourne being very small, you still can catch a bus out here. Here we have the bus stop. It's the Stagecoach 53 that you need. Lincoln to Market Raisin, and also connections from Market Raisin to Grimsby as well. And this bus stop, by the way, is actually called Letterbox because there is Cabourne's letterbox. The rest of this main walk is a little vanilla, so that gives me a chance to tell you a little story about a sack of grain belonging to a local and very selfish farmer. He refused to offer it to a passing holy man, and as punishment it was turned into a large rock, which is hidden by trees and branches at Fownby Top near Cabourne High Wood. It's said to be cursed, a curse which is said to fall on anyone who tries to move the stone in any way. One example of this was during the building of Cabourne's largest structure. That structure will get its own special section in a few moments. One of the masons who built it cut a piece from the stone, and it proved to be a very bad decision. He would die shortly afterwards. If you were to stumble upon the stone yourself, it's said you would experience an overwhelming feeling that it doesn't belong where it is. But remember, don't move it. So by this point you're probably thinking to yourself, well, Cabourne doesn't really have anything really of interest apart from the church and a few other bits and bobs that we see in practically every village going. However, it does have something of great interest which is off limits to the public, but I can at least show you where it is. That would be Pelham's Pillar. Pelham's Pillar is a monument dedicated to Charles Anderson Pelham, the first Earl of Yarborough, who died in 1846. It forms a small part of the Yarborough estate at Brocklesby. In effect, it's a viewing tower built to enable the Earls to view the estate. It's 39 metres high and it's guarded by 2 stone lions at its entrance door. The pillar is sited in Cabourne High Wood, an area of 12,532,700 trees which were planted by Pelham. Although there are ways to access the pillar, you need permission to do so. It's said that when it was built, everything that could be seen from the top belonged to Charles Anderson Pelham. Its architect was Edward James Wilson of Lincoln. And yes, this is the structure which the mason I spoke about earlier was building when he died. How did he die, you ask? Shortly after cutting the stone, he would fall to his death from the top. So we've come to the north of Cabourne Village now. I have another noisy tractor coming past. Thanks for that, pal. Anyway, Pelham's pillar is behind these trees, and you can walk to it. There is a footpath which goes up towards it, but of course you need permission, like I've just said in that special section. The footpath in question is down there on the left. There's like a little lodge house which you walk past, and then you turn left around these trees and it takes you towards the pillar. Don't do that without permission though, people, because you might get caught. And I didn't have permission, and that's why I gave you that special section on Pelham's pillar. Time to go to Cabourne Parva, the last part of Cabourne Parish, which is smaller than Cabourne Village, but it does have something rather interesting. The camera's going on the dash for this bit. Cabourne Parva might, to the untrained eye, look like a further clump of farm buildings in the middle of nowhere. However, that couldn't be further from the truth. Let's drive down into it. Cabourne Parva is accessed via a single track road off the 1173 to Ryby. Believe it or not, this quiet corner of the world is a well-renowned and unique festival and events site. As we drive in, you'll see an octagonal pump house known as the Gin House. A Grade 2 listed building, it dates from 1830. It's beautifully preserved, and it still has pieces of the old engine and gears. If you whack Cabourne Parva into Google, it won't be long before you're finding images from the Blues and Bikes Festival, one of its most well-known events, which includes a weekend of camping. You can also try out Skidbrook cider while you're here too. Based at Cabourne Parva, they make cider using traditional apple pressing techniques. Oh, and they're proper Lincolnshire apples too. And that's Cabourne, not the easiest one in the world to film, as I'm sure you can appreciate. Very, very small, very strung out, and certainly not one that you can walk around easily. But at least you get some brilliant Lincolnshire countryside, don't you? It's fabulous, and I love it. And that Lincolnshire countryside will continue in next week's episode. And if anything, it's going to get a little bit more beautiful. I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot. This has been the parish of Cabourne, and I'm out.